Welcome to Part 5 of The Red Room. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 9. Though a room had been set up for Dr. Mannering, he didn't stay there long. By the early hours of the night, he found himself in a foul mood, with his nerves running high. He was less concerned about his own discomfort, and even less about the police. After all, he was human, and their lack of responsiveness to his advice irritated him. What truly troubled him was Sir Arthur. He felt uneasy about the plans he had made. Still, the doctor intended to keep an eye on the old man, hoping he could find some rest, even if just in his study chair. Around midnight, Mannering had a rather unpleasant experience, when he could only blame on himself. After resting for an hour in his bedroom, he went downstairs to find Mary and her father quietly sitting together in the expansive library. They were both engrossed in their books, while at the far end of the room, beneath the glow of a moon that glimmered through the tall windows above, lay Theodore May in his coffin. Mary had arranged a stunning collection of white hothouse flowers in an antique Venetian bowl at his feet. Sir Arthur looked concerned for the doctor. "Not in bed," he exclaimed. "This is unacceptable, Mannering. We'll have you ill next. You've been on your feet for so long, and tomorrow holds so much for you. Be sensible, my friend, and get some rest, even if you can't manage to sleep." "I can't sleep tonight. God knows how soon I might be needed by those fools playing with fire upstairs." "We cannot interfere. For me, a sense of peace has finally settled in now that the responsibility of directing things is out of my hands. I began to feel this when poor Flanders arrived, though that tranquility was soon disrupted. I'm even ready for the necessary publicity now. I can face it. If I made a mistake regarding this devoted priest, I won't question how my peers view me." "Don't worry about that," Mannering replied. "Your fellow man has no right to judge you, and while the law has its flaws, it does value logic. Who can argue with your belief that this matter is beyond human understanding? People might critique your wisdom, but not your right to believe. Many would share your feelings. When a person finds themselves lost in uncertainty, they often turn to supernatural explanations for the mysteries surrounding them. This tendency has created fortunes for those who exploit human gullibility. Entire belief systems have been built on it. May certainly presented a strong case to you. He genuinely convinced you that his theory about his son's death was the right one, and while I lament that you came to adopt his perspective and allowed him to act as he thought best, I will be the last to hold your actions up for legal scrutiny. No Christian judge, at the very least, could justly question you. In short, there's no case against anyone at this point. The forces at work here are entirely unknown, and if harm befalls the men upstairs, that only serves as further evidence in your favor." Sir Arthur set down his book, a collection of pious reflections. The events had opened him up to the idea of faith. He was taken aback by Dr. Mannering. "I never expected to hear you acknowledge that. It's fascinating how our thoughts can change, Mannering. Here you are, seeming to let go of your skepticism, while I find myself, at least for now, convinced that only a physical explanation can account for these tragedies." "Why is that?" the physician asked. "Because Theodore May was safe from any dark spirit. Even if he were correct, and his prayer had summoned such a being, expelling it from my home, would the Almighty really allow it to tear apart the very person who freed it? If our faith is genuine, then death could not have come to May through any conscious supernatural means. Yet, as he himself confessed after the loss of his child, he never claimed that faith in God made a person immune to the laws of nature. If, as was mentioned at dinner today, someone in this house has lost their grip on reality and discovered a way to end human life without a trace, then this deceased clergyman was as helpless against that horrifying threat as anyone else would be. But surely this theory is as absurd as those rooted in supernatural beliefs. You know everyone in this house, Sir Arthur. Mary knows them. Henry knows them. I have treated most of them at one point or another. Is there anyone we could suspect?" "Not a single person." Could the war have changed anything? Mary inquired. We understand how shell shock and head injuries can leave a man appearing fine while his mind is actually impaired. Yes, that is certainly true. When these unfortunate men return to everyday life after their time in the hospitals or try to pick up their old jobs, their vulnerabilities often become evident. I have witnessed this firsthand. However, among all the men in Chadlands, there are only 3 instances of such calamity. A few in the village show signs, but none can truly be called insane. Here there is only Fred Conter, who sustained a head injury while aboard ship, but it hasn't left him impaired in any way. Fred is just as sane as I am, maybe even more so, Sir Arthur admitted. I don't truly think there's anything odd going on here, Mannering added. However, if these 4 men are fit to continue their work tomorrow, you can expect them to conduct a thorough investigation of everyone in the house. They might encounter quite a few nervous and hysterical women, and possibly men too. But it's not their job to decide if people are mentally unstable. I know, just as you do, that no one in this house had any part in these tragedies. There has never been a family with fewer secrets than mine, Sir Arthur declared. The morning may bring some clarity, Mary suggested. I hold very little hope that it will, Mannering responded. The inquiry will go on regardless of what happens tonight, and we may all have to head to London to participate. Once they turn Chadlands and everyone connected to it upside down, which they are bound to do, we might be called in if they arrive at no conclusions. I'm ready for that. I won't leave the country until I'm given permission. It should be obvious to everyone that I am, if not the most involved, at least the most eager to unravel this mystery. No one can doubt that. Then you need to conserve your strength and follow sound advice, Mannering urged. I implore you to retire now, and insist that Mary does the same. There is nothing to be gained from this endless waiting, and the living lose precious energy in these pointless vigils. It's well past midnight. Please, Sir Arthur, and you too, Mary. There's no reason to stay up, so I strongly encourage you both to go to bed. But the elder man resisted. Few will find sleep beneath this roof tonight, he said. There's a palpable atmosphere of human anxiety and distress, and understandably so. I'll stay here with this good man. His company is far better than that of many living souls. I find a deep sense of peace here. The dead give me strength. Nonetheless, he joined Mannering in persuading his daughter to step away, feeling certain their friend wouldn't be gone for long. Mary soon departed, insisting she felt no anxiety or nerves. She had always believed that only natural causes had led to her husband's passing, and was confident that morning would bring at least some clarity. She exited the room with Mannering, and after promising to keep a close watch on her father, the doctor lit his pipe and made his way to the billiard room. As he meandered through the hall, his thoughts wandered. He unconsciously followed the direction of his musings, forgetting for a moment the unspoken admonitions of the silent figures above. Mannering ascended the stairs and made his way down the corridor toward the grey room, but didn't get very far. From the shadows, a figure emerged and stopped him. The man aimed an electric torch at Dr. Mannering and recognized him. It turned out that while one detective kept watch outside, others were monitoring from within. At the sound of voices, the door to the grey room swung open, revealing a striking figure caught in the bright light streaming out. It was an imposing, dark shape with huge, flashing eyes, and what appeared to be an elephant's trunk hanging down between them. The watchers, clad in hoods and gas masks, resembled the surreal demons of a Salvator Rosa or Fuseli painting. Their leader addressed the doctor sharply. He knew Mannering's name and acknowledged his apology, but insisted he leave the corridor immediately. I must inspect you first, Frith said. You shouldn't have come here. This is no time for distractions. We can explain everything tomorrow. After raising his hands and allowing for a thorough search, the doctor departed, cursing his own carelessness. He had forgotten that, like everyone else involved, he would have to face the weight of suspicion. As he approached the grey room, which had been strictly off-limits, he realized this would draw unwanted attention to himself. He could only offer the excuse that he had simply forgotten the warning. He anticipated a confrontation the next day and questioned how he could have acted so thoughtlessly. Mental fatigue was a flimsy justification, but it was all he had. An hour later, he returned to Sir Arthur, hoping he might find him asleep. Instead, the master of Chadlands was still reading, in a calm and peaceful mood. He regretted the lapse in judgment that had led his friend into the forbidden gallery. "I'm worried about Mary," he said. "She's only managing to keep up at a terrible cost to her nerves. It's high time she got away, but she won't leave until I can go with her. It shouldn't be long. We must hope they uncover the truth soon, hopefully tonight. I'm very eager for both of you to be on your way. We plan to go to Italy. She's hesitant about the Riviera and longs for Florence or some other quiet place. It'll be cold there. Cold won't hurt us. Are you going to close up Chadlands?" "Impossible. It's the only home for half my older relatives. But if nothing is found out, and we're still left without answers, I'll seal the windows, door, and hearth of the grey room unless the authorities say otherwise. I wish I could fill the place with solid stone or concrete so it wouldn't even be a room anymore." "That's not feasible," the practical doctor replied. "Such weight would bring down the ceiling below. But you can make it quick and seal it tight if they're outmatched." "We're like the blind navigating a world completely unfamiliar to them," Sir Arthur replied. "I had held so much hope in the prayer of that righteous man. Truly, he has gone to his reward. He is reunited with the boy he cherished more than anything on earth, while we are left with deep sorrow and distress. Yet prayers are still being answered, Mannering. I've prayed for patience, and I find myself more at peace. The pain has settled in my soul." The dread of public scrutiny and the agonizing turmoil I felt when I realized my name would be splashed across every newspaper in England. Those sufferings are behind me now. In one sense, my life feels over, and reflecting upon it, I cannot help but recognize how little I understood the true nature of existence. I took my comfortable days for granted, never believing that unimaginable suffering and despair awaited me as well. Everyone thinks their own burden is the heaviest, I suppose, and for me, these events have drained the very essence from my being. They scorched me, and the bright light from the outside world piercing into the private corners of my life made me wish I could hide among the hills. But now, I feel I can endure anything. You must not see it that way, Sir Arthur. Everyone knows you have done no wrong, and if your judgment is under scrutiny, what does that truly matter? It's simply the fate that every man, great or small, renowned or unknown, has to face. You cannot escape criticism any more than you can evade slander. It's remarkable that you can speak with such conviction, maintain your patience, and perceive things so clearly. However, for me, that clarity only heightens my anxiety tonight. I don't really care at all for the well-being of those men, since they chose to ignore my advice. But I'm human, and just as I feel for a sick patient and celebrate when they recover, I can't help but worry about the risk these four are facing. They're sitting there, or maybe they're walking around. They've got gas masks on and weapons in their hands. But if we're up against a blind, deaf, mindless force that acts without thought or feeling, then the fate of 10 men is just as uncertain as that of one. This thing operates day or night, that much is clear. And since it likely acts automatically, like lightning or steam, how can they possibly escape? Don't forget that this invisible, lethal force could be controlled by a human mind, someone pointed out. That's impossible, Sir Arthur. You're being reckless to make such a definitive statement after everything we've been through together. Let me urge you to get some rest. This is taking a toll on you. You're only human, after all, not made of iron. The men are holding up fine for now. I'm going to grab something to eat and drink, Mannering said, and then I'll leave you in peace for a bit. Go ahead. You'll find everything you need in the dining room. I told Caldwell to make sure there was plenty on hand in case the detectives needed food. Should I bring you something? Perhaps a whiskey and a biscuit? No, I don't need anything. The doctor went his way and spent an hour eating and drinking. Then he felt an overwhelming urge to sleep, but he fought it, lit his pipe again, and resumed his pacing through the hall. He paused at the library door and was pleased to hear a gentle but steady snoring. The sound was comforting to Mannering. He wandered around once more, determined to stay awake until the vigil was over. Then he could go to bed and finally get some rest. It was now past 3 o'clock on a calm winter night, a brief pause between yesterday's storm and the rough weather yet to come. The doctor stepped outside for a while and walked along the terrace. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a weak light as the night remained mild and cloudy. Bright beams spilled from the east and south windows of the grey room, cutting through the darkness. Upon returning to the house, the doctor paused at the foot of the staircase, listening to the murmurs of men's voices and the shuffle of their feet. They were changing shifts, and the detective in the corridor relinquished his post to someone coming in from the inside. All seemed well for now. Mannering made his way to the billiard room, sank into the settee for a time, and dozed off for another hour. At one point, he lost track of time, woke with a start, irritated at his own weakness, and glanced at his watch. He realized he had only napped for 5 minutes. At 6 o'clock, he reassured himself that morning had arrived and returned to Sir Arthur. The old man had awakened and sat in quiet reflection, waiting for the daylight to spill into the large window above the deceased. "It has been a peaceful night," he remarked. "I felt the presence of dear May close by, and it seems as though his son is near as well. Are the watchers all right?" "I leave that for you to find out, but don't get too close to them. The night is fading over the woods. Morning has begun. Surely the household will be stirring soon. I'll go check if I can. Please stay here a few moments until I call my daughter. I don't want our dear friend to be alone until he departs." "I'll stay for now, but please don't wake Mary if she's asleep, and you should rest for a few hours yourself." "I've managed to sleep a bit." Sir Arthur left him and ascended to the corridor, where weak light was already creeping through the windows. He stood at the top of the staircase and called out. "Is everything all right, gentlemen?" he asked loudly, but got no response. "Is everything all right?" he called again. From the shadows, Inspector Frith appeared. He had removed his gas mask. Sir Arthur flicked on an electric light. "Nothing has happened, I hope?" "Nothing at all, Sir Arthur. No sign or sound of anything unusual to report." "Thank goodness for that." Though we had thoroughly considered the possibilities, we were still on guard for gas, the detective explained. That appeared to be the only plausible way that life could have been endangered in that room. So we wore the latest gas masks, designed to withstand any toxic combination that could come from a lab. It's well known that new, deadly gases were discovered just before the war ended, gases said to be remarkably faster and more lethal than any used before. Whether the government knows how to handle them, I couldn't say, but no gas was released in the grey room last night. Otherwise, a rat in a trap and some birds in a cage we had nearby would have reacted. The room is completely safe. Sir Arthur followed him down the corridor, chatting with the others as well. They had left the grey room and taken off their masks. They appeared tired and worn in the growing daylight. "You've performed your duty admirably, and I'm extremely grateful that no harm has come to you. What can I arrange for you to eat?" They thanked him and said they would be ready for breakfast in about an hour. Sir Arthur then returned to his quarters, rang for service, and gave the necessary instructions. He joined Mary soon afterward, and she shared in his relief. She was already dressed and went down immediately to see Dr. Mannering. Henry Gainsborough joined them shortly after. He had already heard from Fred Caunter that the watchers had made it through the night safely. Chadlands was the site of yet another inquest, and once again the coroner's jury concluded that Theodore May, like his son before him, had died by the hand of God. Later that day, the deceased was transported to his own parish, and 2 days later Sir Arthur, Mary, and her cousin attended the funeral. Meanwhile, the detectives began their serious investigation. They approached their work methodically, following their own plan. They made sure not to overlook a single person who lived at Chadlands, and they also discreetly inquired about every guest who had been present when Tom May died. They delved into the sailor's private life as well, steadily exploring every possible avenue related to his death. The detectives chose to set aside the cause of death for the time being, reasoning that if they could identify the assassin, they would uncover the murder method in due course. However, from the outset, their efforts yielded no illumination, and they found no clues in Tom May's connections with others, or in the background and character of those under scrutiny. Regarding the house party, only Ernest Anglin and his wife had previously met the sailor, and that was at his wedding. As for the staff at Chadlands, there was nothing to suggest that any of them had ever been offended by Tom's actions. They were, in fact, loyal to their employers. There were no odd behaviors or signs that could raise suspicions. In Frith's view, the case was extraordinary because, despite the number of people involved, there was not a hint of animosity or resentment in any of their interactions with the family. Everyone was straightforward and sincere, expressing nothing but respect for their employer. Many of them had followed in the footsteps of their parents in their positions. It was a large household, tightly bound by tradition and affection. Henry Gainsborough stood under no suspicion, although his previous attachment to Mary was well known. It didn't take a keen observer to notice his candid sincerity during the questioning, which extended to Dr. Mannering as well. The doctor's unwelcome presence in the corridor on the night they kept watch had annoyed those present. For 3 weeks, they worked diligently without any triumphs, relying on their knowledge and experience. In the familiar phrase, they left no stone unturned. After they submitted a report that openly acknowledged their complete failure, a small commission was formed to conduct a further inquiry and called upon the key individuals to attend. Sir Arthur, his daughter, Henry Gainsborough, and Dr. Mannering were questioned with kindness and understanding. Unfortunately, they could offer no insights, shed no light, and proposed no new lines of inquiry beyond what had already been explored. To the world, the mystery faded away like a star that shone briefly before dimming and vanishing again. New issues and stories soon captured the attention of the newspapers, and eventually Sir Arthur found relief in opening his morning paper with no mention of Chadlands. The architects revisited the room, and the authorities granted permission to a group of notable spiritualists to conduct both night and day vigils there, although no single observer was allowed to stay. 3 spiritualists spent a day and a night in the grey room, but were met with no supernatural occurrences. Eventually, the master of Chadlands received the word that he could leave England, but he was instructed to seal off the grey room and ensure it was no longer accessible. The bureaucratic knots surrounding the tragedy were finally untied, and the distressed couple hastily prepared to depart. The owner promised to secure the grey room as instructed upon his return from overseas, and in the meantime had both the door and window boarded up with sturdy timber. The household had long since regained its composure and even found joy again. Some took pride in the attention they were receiving, and none showed any signs of fear about staying. However, Sir Arthur suspected that not many would venture down the grand corridor until the time of his return drew closer. Chapter 10. He took Mary to Florence, believing that this vibrant city would offer her distractions and fresh experiences to reignite her interest in life, free from the painful memories that had weighed her down. All he wanted was to see her find some semblance of contentment. He knew real happiness was still a long way off for her. One evening, they stood in the piazza of Michelangelo, gazing out over Florence, a shimmering expanse of dim, red gold spread out below them. The setting sun cast a magical glow over the towers and rooftops, draping the city in a veil of indescribable light, while the Arno River meandered gracefully through the heart of it all. Sir Arthur felt a quiet joy, knowing that in just 2 weeks his friends Ernest and Nellie Anglin would join them in Florence. Mary was also eager to welcome them for her father's sake. He largely let her be on her own, joining her for leisurely walks while allowing her to explore freely, aware that the world of art was beginning to have a profound impact on her. Although no one was there to guide her studies, she pursued knowledge with her own plan. At first, her efforts sometimes left her drained, but she persisted, slowly realizing the vastness of what she wanted to learn. Music calmed her, and painting captivated her with both its sensory pleasure and intellectual challenge. Perhaps she initially preferred music, as it provided a direct balm for her spirit. Through its melodies, she found the strength to reflect on her brief romance. She even insisted that her father listen to the pieces she began to treasure. Their thoughts naturally flowed along different paths. While she made a determined effort to engage with new interests and set aside the pain of the past until thinking became manageable again, Sir Arthur often found himself lost in painful memories, harboring a persistent desire to uncover the darkness that surrounded them. To his straightforward and uncomplicated mind, mystery was unwelcome, and the realization that his home would forever hold a deep and troubling secret frequently invaded his thoughts, sometimes leading him to contemplate never returning to Chadlands. Yet a natural yearning to revisit the familiar comfort of Devonshire slowly overwhelmed him, and as spring unfolded, he often sighed for home while questioning how he could face it. The grim memories of winter would creep back over him like a shadow, making the idea of returning increasingly unappealing. Mary, however, understood her father well enough, and in the enchanting glow of the evening sky, as Florence spread beneath them in quiet beauty, she insisted they could not linger much longer. "We have plenty of time," he replied. "I find I'm not too old to learn, and a man would have to be quite foolish not to learn in a place like this. While the arts may never hold much meaning for me, your experience is different, and I'm grateful that these things will enrich your future. I may be a Philistine, and I'll likely always remain so, but I'm one that wishes he had appreciated it sooner." "It's a whole new world, Father," she said. "It has done so much for me as an unhappy woman, not just by distracting me from my own troubles, but also by lessening my pain. I can't explain why or how, but music and the grand, solemn paintings created by those who have long since passed all touch my memories of dear Tom. I find it striking that there seem to be far more influential figures who have passed away than those who remain, and yet they're not truly gone. They continue to exist in the work they've created. Tom lives on in the love we shared. Every time I hear beautiful music, he feels closer and more precious to me. During those moments, I can bear the thought of him more easily, and remembering him will always bring me comfort." "God bless art if it has such power," he remarked. "We approach it with the innocence of children, and I fear I shall always remain a child, never fully understanding it. But for you, the important messages will be revealed. I hope that life never takes you away from these things in the years ahead." "Never, never," she declared emphatically. "Art has given me too much. I can't imagine living without it. Already, I feel I simply couldn't." "What did you see today?" he inquired. "I spent the morning at the Pitti. I was most taken with Fra Bartolomeo's grand altar piece and Titian's portrait of Cardinal Ippolito de' Medici. You must see him, such a strange, unhappy soul at only 23 years old. Just 2 years later he was poisoned, and his troubled, dissatisfied eyes were closed forever. And the concert was extraordinary, capturing such a starved longing in the soul of the musician. Andrea del Sarto was so gracious and noble. Though Henry James dismisses him as second-rate due to his mind, he will never be second-rate in my eyes. Tomorrow you simply must come and see some of my favorite pieces. I won't bore you. I don't know enough to bore you yet. Oh, and Allori's Judith is so beautiful, though I wonder if he truly did her justice. Certainly, his Judith could never have accomplished what the real Judith did. And there's a painting by Rubens, dark and old, yet it reminded me of our woods where they unfold above the valley." He dedicated the following morning to Mary, wandering through the gallery alongside her. He made an effort to share in her excitement, and at times he genuinely succeeded. Then came a small incident, so minor that they forgot all about it within an hour, but it would come rushing back to them at an unexpected moment that was quickly approaching. They had parted ways, and Sir Arthur's attention was captured by a portrait. Yet he soon shifted his focus to a coat of arms on the frame featuring a golden bull's head against a red background. The heraldic symbol was worn and faded, yet there was something oddly familiar about it. He felt certain he had seen it before. He turned to Mary, eager for her thoughts, but she couldn't recall it either. Sir Arthur enjoyed engaging his daughter's curiosity, and when he realized that his presence among the paintings brought her joy, with his insights causing her no distress, he decided to explore further. You must share what you know, he said. It would be the blind leading the blind, dear, she replied. But I delight in discovering things I think you'll appreciate. The truth is, neither of us knows much about what we should really enjoy. That doesn't matter at all, he insisted. We need to start by learning to appreciate art in the first place. When Ernest arrives, he'll want us to live in his fancy touring car and dash around, so we should make the most of our time now. Art doesn't captivate him, and he'll be quite astonished to learn I've been looking at all this. We should try to get him interested too, if we can. That would be impossible. Ernest doesn't get art, and music is lost on him as well. He views art with skepticism, as something rather unmanly. Poor Mr. Anglin. Don't feel sorry for him, Mary. His life is full enough without that. But I've come to learn that no life can be truly complete. Before long, Ernest and Nellie arrived, and just as Sir Arthur had predicted, their idea of pleasure revolved around long motor excursions to nearby attractions and beautiful vistas. In the new light of her life, Mary noticed her father's friends felt a bit smaller to her. Engaging with them and sharing their interests no longer came as naturally as it once had. They chalked it up to her troubles and tried to lift her spirits. Ernest Anglin even expressed concern over her newfound interests, hoping they were just a phase. She seems to escape reality into a realm of art and music, he remarked. You should be cautious, my dear Arthur. These pursuits hold no lasting appeal for a sound mind. For 2 weeks, they spent a lot of time with their friends, and Mary observed how her father seemed to thrive in the company of Ernest and Nellie. They shared a deep understanding and echoed so many of the same beliefs. Ernest held a dismissive view of the Italian character, arguing that a nation relying on wine and silk, and such wines, must possess too much femininity to truly excel. He fancied that he had a grasp of the language, even though he could neither speak nor write it himself. We, educated at Eton and Oxford, remember just enough Latin to understand these people, he proclaimed. For what is Italian but the diluted tongue of ancient Rome? Nellie Anglin echoed many of Ernest's equally foolish remarks, and Mary found it amusing to witness how absurdly hollow such ostensibly grounded individuals appeared in a foreign land. They carried their ignorance and provincial mindset with them as openly and unashamedly as their bags. She felt no regret at their departure. She and her father planned to linger for a time at Como before heading home. Their friends were set to travel by car across the battlefields of France soon, and both Ernest and Nellie came to see Sir Arthur and his daughter off for Milan. As the train began to pull away, Mr. Anglin rushed to the carriage door and handed in a newspaper. "I've got you last week's field, Arthur," he said. They crossed the Apennines on a night when fireflies danced in every thicket beneath a starry, moonless sky. As the train paused at quiet, unassuming stations, the lovely songs of nightingales filled the air. However, they couldn't visit Lake Como, for letters awaited Sir Arthur in Milan, one of which urged his return. This letter, from a stranger, was particularly pressing, an Italian who had travelled all the way from Rome to London just to reach out to Sir Arthur, while the master of Chadlands was only half a day's journey away. The writer remained in London, planning to stay there until he received a response. He wrote cautiously, but one detail stood out with unsettling significance. He delved into the mystery of the grey room and believed he could shed light on the troubling events tied to it. Sir Arthur hesitated, considering Mary, but felt reassured when she suggested they head back without delay. "It would be foolish to wait," she said. "This means just as much to me as it does to you, Dad. I couldn't enjoy Como knowing there might be even a flicker of hope for us at home. Nothing can change what has happened, but if there's a chance to understand why, it would be an incredible relief for both of us. Henry was supposed to meet us at Menaggio. He will be just as grateful as we are if anything comes of this. He won't leave England until Thursday. He can come to Chadlands instead." "I would give anything to clarify these matters," her father admitted. "I want nothing more than to understand the reasons behind your dear husband's passing, but the implications here are deeply concerning. I can hardly believe this man feels justified in speaking of crime." Would that word resonate differently for him than it does for us? He writes in perfect English. Whatever lies ahead, we must confront it with hope. Such occurrences are not mere coincidences. He is clearly a gentleman, a man of refinement and sensitivity. I find myself favorably inclined towards him already. There's something noble and perhaps old-fashioned in the way he expresses himself. No young man writes like this anymore. The letter, which they both read several times, revealed the qualities that Sir Arthur had mentioned. It was composed with a courtesy and finesse reminiscent of a more elegant time. There were even hints of humour embedded within it, which neither he nor Mary fully grasped. Claridge's Hotel, London, April 9. Dear Sir Arthur Gainsborough, like many others who know England, I have recently been deeply intrigued and moved by the astonishing events reported from Chadlands, in Devon, under your roof. The details were shared in Italian newspapers with little elaboration, but I found them in the Times, being proficient in your language and an admirer of your country. I had intended to reach out to you, but as fate would have it, I found myself in the company of one of your personal friends. At a gathering hosted by the British ambassador in Rome, a young soldier, Colonel Vane, assisted me during a crowded moment, leading to our acquaintance. I would not have wanted to impose upon another generation, yet he seemed interested in conversing with someone familiar with his own language. He was quite insightful for a military man. Naturally, he didn't mention the tragedy at Chadlands, but when we discussed espionage in warfare and similar topics, I discovered he was knowledgeable about the circumstances surrounding the death of the esteemed English detective, Peter Flanders. I then inquired, as I am personally invested in the matter, whether it would be possible to obtain more detailed accounts of the story regarding the Grey Room. To my astonishment, he told me that he was present at Chadlands when your dearly departed son-in-law, Captain Thomas May, passed away. I recalled Colonel Vane's name from the newspaper reports about the tragedy at Chadlands. Recognizing my genuine curiosity, Colonel Vane graciously accepted an invitation to dinner. I took great pleasure in hosting him and learning many personal and intimate details about the incident. He shared these insights in confidence, trusting that I would not betray his trust. In fact, I had already informed him of my intention to communicate with you based on his account. It seems unlikely that I can contribute anything significant to the case, and I may soon realize that I lack the means to assist you or shed light on what is so deeply hidden in shadows. Nonetheless, I remain uncertain. Small details can often lead to larger truths, and although the past is regrettably irreversible, since even our Creator cannot undo yesterday's actions or erase events locked in time, there is always the future. And if we could only interpret the past correctly, which we can never truly do, perhaps the future would not seem as painful and mysterious as it often does. Oh, if I can help you make sense of the past, I might alleviate some of your concerns about the future. And should I, by some unlikely chance, be correct in my suspicions, it is crucial that I make myself available to you for the greater good. In short, a grave crime has taken place, and the circumstances suggest that further serious offences could follow. I make no definite claims, but I believe the individuals responsible for these murders are still at work, as the police have been utterly thwarted. At Chadlands, there may still lurk an unrelenting threat to those who come after you, a danger to all humanity as long as it continues unchecked. I'm writing with the hope that you want to unravel this terrible mystery, both for your own peace of mind and for the reputation of your family. I must admit, there's not much promise in what I can offer, so please don't expect too much. However, I genuinely believe that if there is anyone alive today who holds the answers to your troubles, it is me. There's always a glimmer of hope that one might rid the world of such a dreadful burden, and the satisfaction that would bring me would be immense. But I can't make any guarantees. If I'm heading in the right direction, let me share the reasoning behind my thoughts. Human knowledge might not be able to solve this, and I could very well come up short. It's also possible that Rev Theodore May didn't make a mistake, and that he, at the cost of his own life, expelled a spirit whose workings were allowed for reasons known only to its creator. Still, I believe differently. If I'm right, it will be evident that everything has unfolded in a way that aligns with human reason and can be understood. So I travelled to England, pleased to have the chance, and went to your manor only to learn, much to my disappointment, that you weren't home and had gone to Florence, just a short distance from my own residence. Now I'm writing to the post office in Milan, where your servant advised me to send my letters for the time being. If you're coming back soon, I'll be waiting. If not, perhaps we can meet in Italy. But I would much prefer to believe that you will return soon, for I can't be of much practical help until I have, with your permission, visited your home and seen the grey room for myself. I sincerely hope you accept my heartfelt regards and sympathy for the tremendous hardships you and Madame may have faced. Until I hear from you, I am staying at Claridge's Hotel in London. I am honoured to be yours faithfully, Virgilio Morgan. Despite feeling little hope, Sir Arthur quickly replied to this message. He announced his plan to return to England the following week, after which he hoped Signor Morgan could visit Chadlands whenever it suited him. He expressed his gratitude, but worried that since the Italian based his theory on a crime, he couldn't feel particularly optimistic, as the likelihood of such a thing had seemed non-existent. Mary, however, considered the letter more deeply. She even suspected that the writer had more faith in his abilities than he let on. One has always sensed that the grey room is somehow connected to Italy, she said. We know that the ceiling was crafted by Italians in Elizabeth's time. That's true, but so were all the other moulded ceilings in the house. He may have knowledge of Italian craftsmanship, and perhaps knows of a similar ceiling that conceals a secret. But a ceiling can't hide a murderer, and he clearly believes he is onto the trail of a crime. Still, Sir Arthur's interest grew as the time to return home approached. Only once that decision was made did he realize how much he truly longed to be there. The horror and suffering of the past had already begun to fade. He longed to see his woods and meadows bursting into life, to hear the gentle flow of his river, and to walk among familiar voices and paths. Chadlands welcomed them on a rare May evening, and the genuine joy of his people moved Sir Arthur deeply. Henry Gainsborough had already arrived, eager to read the Italian's letter. He and Mary strolled through the gardens, and he noticed a change in her. She spoke more slowly and no longer laughed, yet she had greeted him warmly and was eager to hear everything about him. I thought it would disappoint you if I halted our conversation at the last moment, she said, but I knew the reason would satisfy you. I feel somewhat hopeful, my father does not. But my hope is tinged with fear, for Signor Morgan talks of a great crime. That's just a silly theory, I'm afraid. Tell me about yourself. Are you well? Yes, I'm very well. You must come to Italy someday, Henry. I want to show you all the wonderful things I've seen. I would love that. I feel so uncultured. It's just sheer laziness on my part, really. I want to dive into art and understand what truly matters. You have the talent for it. Are you writing any more poetry? Nothing worth sharing with you. She still possessed that old charm, but he held no illusions about their future. He knew how her husband had affected her, even if their time together had been brief, and he was certain she would never marry again. A familiar sound drew his attention, and soon the old spaniel, Prince, made his way to Mary. He approached her feebly, and though she petted him affectionately, he was little more than a shadow of his former self. We should put him down, the poor old thing. It's cruel to keep him alive like this. But Caldwell insists that he won't go while Uncle Arthur is abroad. Caldwell has really taken care of him. Make sure to tell my father that. He might blame Caldwell for letting Prince suffer like this. I know he had hoped that the poor dog would either be painlessly put to sleep or pass away before he returned. Caldwell would never have allowed him to die unless given the go-ahead. And I'm certain my father could never have brought himself to write those orders or send them. You know, father. Letters awaited the traveller's return, including one from Colonel Vane, who detailed his encounter with Signor Morgan and expressed hope that something might come of it. There was also a letter from the stranger himself, who seemed pleased with the invitation and proposed to arrive at Chadlands the following Monday, unless he received contrary instructions. When the day finally arrived, Sir Arthur made his way to Exeter to greet his guest and drive him back in the motor car. At first sight of the Signor, Sir Arthur felt a sharp pang of surprise at his age. Virgilio Morgan was indeed an old man. Once tall, he now stooped slightly, and although he wasn't frail, he required some assistance and was accompanied by a middle-aged Italian. The traveller carried himself with a dignified air. His brown, clean-shaven face looked as if the skin had shrunk rather than wrinkled, yet it didn't evoke the image of a mummified figure. His hair was still thick and as white as snow. His dark eyes, sharp and bright, demonstrated that despite large glasses giving him an owl-like appearance, his long vision remained clear. He often remarked on this, proving time and again that beneath those lenses, his eyesight was unimpaired. His round face radiated intelligence and humor. Although he claimed to be 80 years old, he exuded an astonishing vitality and deep curiosity about life and all its offerings. The old man had witnessed the human experience from the sidelines, as if he understood the game better than those who played it. He openly admitted this perspective and expressed his own disappointment in it. "I have never done a day of honest work in my life," he confessed. "I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Alas, I've been shockingly lazy. It was my calling to observe. I should have at least written a book, but the truth is, everything I wish to say has been articulated so beautifully by Count Garbonneau in his timeless works that I would merely be repeating what's already been said. The world is just too full of echoes as it is. Believe me, if I had to earn my keep, I would have made quite an impression, for I have a sharp mind. Are you familiar with England, sir? When I tell you that I married an English woman, and that both my sons have English blood, you'll understand the depth of my affection. My dear wife was from Somerset." Mary May always said that the old Italian captured her heart, and even stirred a sense of warmth in her long before she had known him for half an hour. There was a charm in his blend of childlike simplicity and vast knowledge. Truly, no one could resist his charming humor and old-fashioned manners. The old man could be straightforward and genuine, but only when it suited him. It wasn't merely the second innocence of age, for his mind remained sharp and worked much faster than any in Chadlands. Yet he was humble and enjoyed a good joke. Time had indeed left its mark on him, and at times his memory would fail him, leaving him stumbling over words, but that only seemed to happen when he was tired. "Morning is when I am at my best," he told them. "You might find me quite dull after dinner, I fear." Signor Morgan turned out to be quite the conversationalist, often revealing that he came from the nobility of his country, and that he counted many distinguished figures among his friends. The reason for his visit was not brought up on the day he arrived. Instead, he spoke fondly about Italy, chuckling at the thought of travelling through Florence just to find Sir Arthur in England, and upon discovering that his hostess was unfamiliar with the treasures of art, he adapted the conversation to enlighten her. "If you find that paintings fulfill an unrecognized desire within you, that is wonderful," he declared. "I know little about music, but I understand a great deal about painting, and I can see you are eager to learn. The spirit may be willing, but it probably doesn't yet realize what lies ahead. You are feeling your way in the dark, like a child without a protector or a mentor to show you the way. That is nothing but a waste of time. When you return to Italy, you must start from the beginning if you truly mean to pursue your craft, not from the middle. Only those who don't understand art evaluate it based on skill, for there are no levels in art. No one has surpassed Giotto, because technique and craftsmanship are merely reflections of their time. They lie outside the essence of art. Art is, in truth, a constant. It shifts like the sea's surface changes from moment to moment, but it doesn't evolve. There are great artists and lesser ones, grand movements and smaller ones, just as there are towering waves, gentle breezes and fierce storms, yet all are composed of the same fundamental substance. In the one case it is art, in the other the ocean remains unchanged. I will outline your education, if you agree, starting with the pioneers, those great masters who laid the foundations. I spent 5 years in Siena because I cherished those beginnings, and you must learn to appreciate, and honor them if you hope to grasp that illumination in the shadows known as the Renaissance. He pulled away from Mary for a moment, trying to engage Sir Arthur, and found success. A benevolent autocracy is the ideal form of government, my friend. This is the vision of all profound thinkers like Machiavelli, Nietzsche, Stendhal, and Gobineau. Liberty and equality are contradictory terms. They cannot coexist. When liberty is granted, the strong will ensure that equality is crushed, and rightly so. Equality is a cry for the foolish, a denial of nature, a perversion. Even the ants understand this. I imagine you view the rising tide of democracy, or what is labeled as such, with considerable skepticism. I do, Sir Arthur replied openly. Our monarchs are somewhat affected by this craze. I worry for them. We must not cater to the leaders of the mob, for they are not, and never have been, the true multitude. They, not the mob, are the ones out to kill, as you put it. But a state that believes it can thrive under the rule of the working class is bound to fail. Such a constitution would violate natural law and inevitably carry within it the seeds of its own destruction. The end of such a system would be unimaginably grotesque. After all, the demise of large, crass entities is always a dreadful thing. Only the noble can die with dignity or know how to depart gracefully. Who stands with you today, Signor? Asked Henry Gainsborough. More than I can count, I hope. Gobineau is my guiding light in these turbulent times. You must read his work if you haven't already. He was the very essence of the Renaissance, radiating its brilliance like a lighthouse casting its glow over dark waters. He, more than anyone, understood it and mourned the loss of its bright hopes and glory as they faded from the earth, crushed under the weight of humanity's unyielding superstitions and the unfortunate burden of the Jewish people. Alas! The Jews have brought ruin to many things beyond the Saviour we all revere. The Renaissance was clearly Signor Morgan's favourite topic, and he returned to it repeatedly. It was characteristic of him to mix his deep devotion as a Catholic with sentiments that were distinctly pagan. Christianity has led to the creation of numerous slaves and charlatans, he stated. One cannot help but lament this truth while still being honest. It has too often driven away the truly valuable members of society from the temple of life. It has cast out the brave, the pure, and the strong into darkness, and elevated the ordinary human, who is rarely courageous, seldom strong, and often not genuinely pure. A horrifying tide threatens to drown all that truly matters. The proud, beautiful beings that validate the existence of humanity will soon roam the hills alongside the hawks and leopards, hunted like them. Outcasts, pariahs, unwanted, despised. The spirit of Christianity seems to lean towards socialism, I fear, Sir Arthur remarked. It's one of those matters I don't fully grasp, but the modern clergy clearly express their views on it. Do your clergy really speak with clarity? They do, and we must, of course, pay attention. The truth can be painful. How can we align our aristocratic instincts with our faith? I seek understanding, and I hope you won't mind my personal inquiry. I find myself largely in agreement with your noble sentiments. But as a good Christian, should I be, how do you reconcile the one true faith in your heart with these ideas in your mind, Signor? The old man's eyes sparkled, and a youthful smile brightened his aged face. That's a good question, a clever jab, Sir Arthur. There's only one answer to that, my friend. With God, all things are possible. Henry chuckled, while his uncle looked puzzled. You think that's no answer, the Italian continued. But reason deserves its moment in the sun, even if we sometimes have to tuck it away. Many great men refused to dim their light, and ended up having it snuffed out for them. It's a tricky subject. Let us keep our thoughts compartmentalized. It's safer that way. If you've lived beyond 80 years, you come to cherish safety. But I also love joy and romance, and isn't religion nearly the only joy and romance left to us? It's affirmation, remember, not negation, that makes the world go round. The intellectuals forget that, leaving them barren. Signor Morgan's mind raced ahead of his listeners. He spoke endlessly about everything except the matter weighing on their minds until 10:30, when his servant arrived to retrieve him. He then got up, like a dutiful child, and bid them good night. Stefano is my guardian angel, he said, a creature of excruciating punctuality. But he adds years to my life. He forgets nothing. I wish you a warm farewell until tomorrow and offer my sincere thanks for your hospitality. I will have breakfast in my room, if that's all right, and I'll be ready at 11 o'clock to be of service. Then, if you would be so kind, you can answer some questions for me, and I will, God willing, try to assist you.